Alrighty, hello. My name is Larkin Hoogerhyde. Let's hope this take two works and I can upload it. But I decided to study parental investment and the development of children within sports. Um, so just a little bit of an overview on why I wanted to choose this topic. Um, For me, I grew up playing sports my whole life. I was a runner. I did cross country and track. My sister played a couple sports, but she was mostly into music and she sings a lot, does theater, and my brother golfs. So there's kind of a variety of different sports that my family is involved with and or the lack of, like my sister. So I wanted to look at what motivates or what drives investment into children within sports. So I wanted to look at the impact of investment from parents and coaches on child development. I think it would be good to consider the child's satisfaction with their sport, as well as the differing levels of investment or various types of investment that a parent may give to their child. Another thing I was interested in looking at was emotional connections, values, and etiquette learned through sports involvement, as well as parents' behaviors and attitude towards the youth in sports involvement. I think it's very stereotypical in a lot of media where we see movies where a parent is enforcing their views or likes and dislikes on their child. So the parent's attitude and behavior may have a huge impact on the child's development. And then I also wanted to know what parental behaviors are desired by the children. Do they want to be pushed? Do they want to be pressured by their parents to continue with the sport or to work harder? So the first study that I looked at was on parental involvement. And this specifically was aiming to assess the perceived and desired behaviors of parents from the children. So this study consisted of 80 pre-adolescent male soccer players, ages 11 to 14. For the measures, the study aimed to assess the perceived and desired parental involvement by their children and their satisfaction or dissatisfaction with the parent-specific behaviors. The study used the Parental Involvement in Sports Questionnaire, PISQ for short, and they were questioned both before and after a practice session held by a coach. So the results of this study showed that children perceived moderate to high levels of parental involvement and pressure. They perceived moderate levels of directive behavior and low levels of praise and understanding. Children also desired active involvement, and they did desire pressure from their parents to work harder. Although children who desired low levels of parental involvement generally received lower levels of parent pressure within the sport. One thing to note is this age group is closer to adolescence, so that wasn't something I particularly liked, and they only studied male soccer players. I would have preferred to get a female and male perspective, perhaps maybe a coach's perspective in there. The next study that I looked at was on the impact of family financial status and investment. Every year, the cost of playing a sport goes up and up and up, and it also varies depending on which sport the child is involved in. So I wanted to know if these children are picking up on this financial investment and all the pressures involved with dealing with financial issues. So this study consisted of 163 parent-child dyads from roughly 600 families across the U.S. So they really tried to get a good sample population to represent all 50 states. Mothers and fathers in the study were 27 to 59 years old, and the children and adolescents were 8 to 18 years old. So it does include some adolescents within that sample. Another thing to note is that they were majority of the participants were males, 126 males, and only 37 females participated. They used a variety of different scales to measure the perceived parent pressure and child enjoyment, but they also wanted to look at child's commitment to the sport. So they used the pressure subscale of the parental involvement and activity scale, the enjoyment subscale of the sport commitment model, as well as the commitment subscale of the sport commitment model. And then they did a general demographic questionnaire. The results showed that increases in family financial investment predicted increases in perceived parent pressure. So the more the parents are paying for this sport, the more pressure they're putting on their child. Another thing was that family financial investment had no impact on enjoyment. Family financial investment did not have an impact on the child's commitment as well. Perceived pressure did predict reductions in child enjoyment. So the more pressure there was being placed on the child, the less they were enjoying their sport and their involvement within it. Perceived parent pressure also had no effect on the child's commitment, although increases in enjoyment predicted increases in commitment. So the more the child is happy and satisfied with everything within the sport, with the pressure they're getting from their parents, if they're satisfied with that, it predicted that they will be more committed and involved in the sport. The next study that I looked at was on perceived parental success standards. For me, I always felt like my mom wanted me to succeed, and that I felt like if I failed that she would be super harsh on me. So I thought parental success standards would be something very interesting to look at on the development of the child within a sport. Okay, so this study looked at perceived parental success standards, like I mentioned, but it wanted to assess it in relationship to the athlete's self-esteem, performance anxiety, and achievement goal orientation. So this study consisted of 612 basketball players, 369 boys, and 243 girls, so a better representation of the female population, although it's not quite where I'd like it to be. Another thing to note is that they were ages 9 to 16 years old, so we are pushing more of the adolescence age. But the final sample consisted of 543 athletes. Using the Perceived Parental Success Standard Scale, Perception of Success Questionnaire, Achievement Goal Orientation Questionnaire, Sports Anxiety Scale 2, Washington Self-Description Questionnaire, and Motivational Climate Scale for youth sports, they tested all the athletes both before and at the end of the season, and results showed a significant mediation between coach climate and outcome scores. Another thing to note is that the parent's ego mediated the relationship between the coach's ego climate and the athlete's anxiety and ego goal orientation. Another significant finding was that parents' success standards are sufficient enough to influence the athlete's response to the motivational climates created by the coaches. So, why do parents invest in their children? I mean, obviously it's happening. We see it. I mean, it's everywhere. But what really motivates them? Because they don't have to invest in their children. They don't have to take care of them. They don't have to allow them to play a sport. So, I wanted to look at what really motivates parents to get involved in their children's life and really invest in them. Alright, so this study looked at the motivations for parental investment, but specifically in children in a low fertility context. It was a qualitative study, and it used data from the families in the middle study, and it was aiming to assess why they're willing to invest in so much in their children, and why they feel they have to. So all of the families that participated in the study were middle-income families from the US and Canada. They had at least one child aged 10 to 14 years old, so just under adolescence. There was 156 interviews of mothers who were on average 41 years old and had an average of 2.4 children within the household. The interviews were compared and contrasted, and interactions between the factors influencing the parental investment was analyzed, and the results showed that the mothers really wanted to invest in their children because they wanted them to be educated. They wanted them to go to school, possibly go to college. And then this was in relation to like the mother and as well as the father, but the parents as a whole, what they defined as successful. And if they believed that education would make them successful, then they invested in their child because they really wanted them to get that education. Another motivation for parental investment that this study found was that social pressures often influence their parenting and why they chose to invest. Parental responsibility as well as the norms of good parenting. So these outside factors influencing the parents to invest in the children so they don't look like a bad parent. And then finally, the other motivation that this study found was that the parents wanted to invest in their children for their own personal growth and satisfaction. They wanted to do a good job. They wanted to raise this child and be successful in raising this child. All right, so where can this research go? What can it lead up to? I apologize, the video looks like it's blocking some of my notes if you can't read it, but I'll explain it. I think that there's definitely so much need for more research in this area. Some things that future studies can look into are investments and differences in investment in children. So, for example, siblings, or maybe studies looking at stepchildren. Do they invest more in the child that's biologically related to them in their sport rather than the stepchild? Another thing that future studies could look into was those specific parental behaviors that did influence the children's stress and anxiety in relation to sports. So we can specify this research, and eventually I feel like it could help parents and their parenting on how to do a better job raising these children. How can they watch out for these specific behaviors that'll negatively influence their child's development? Another future direction this could go is studies could look at differences in investment based on skill level and talent. So perhaps one child is more talented than another. Are they investing more in that child, or do they still invest equally? Gender of the athlete. The studies that I looked at really didn't get a good representation of female athletes. So more studies should look into studying female athletes, female coaches as well, and really get just a different perspective on that and in relation to gender of the athlete and parental investment. I said gender of coaches. I think coach influences could be studied more. Maybe the coach is picking up on different things that the parents don't. After all, they are more involved actively in the child while they're involved in the sport. So more specific coach-athlete interactions could be studied. I want to thank you for listening to my presentation. I'm sorry that it's been so crazy. I really hope this uploads, and I really hope I have no more trouble with it. Thank you.